Thank you, Jeremy. It is always fun to work with you and your team. Happy to be here and welcome to everybody on the webinar. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about cultivating love and connection in the lives of children and youth who we work with. Of course, we can all relate to experiencing challenges and struggles, pain, and trauma in our lives. And today we're going to really discuss, take a little bit of a dive into how can we support our students through those challenges. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with you today. Jeremy will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the talk today, please don't hesitate. And also there will be times for you to reflect in the chat. So I invite you to do that. We'll have some activities, some sharing out. So of course, webinars are not always that interactive, but hoping to make it as interactive as possible. So first, I just want to start with my gratitude. Thank you so much for joining us today, inviting our presence of being into this moment together, recognizing that we spend much of our days running from here to there and everywhere, juggling roles and work and family and friend responsibilities. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. And with that, wanting to perhaps set some reasonable expectations, because I don't necessarily think I am going to present any information this afternoon that is going to be mind-blowing or shocking to you. In fact, my sincere hope is reminding you of your inner wisdom and really bringing to light the important work that you're doing on a daily basis already. Perhaps giving you some new practices and new tools that you can integrate, and really hoping to energize you and inspire the work that you're already doing. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start by asking you this question. What is your love story? And just to be clear, I'm asking for your romance novel. Just before this, our colleague Beth reminded us that it's Valentine's Day. So how perfectly fitting that we're talking about love today. But again, not your romance story, not the grocery store, Danielle Steele book that's great for the beach. My mother-in-law is always recommending the next Nicholas Sparks book to me. And honestly, and I'm gonna kind of call it out at the beginning of this talk, it's not always welcomed in education to talk specifically about love. And perhaps that is because love is very broadly defined, and there are a lot of ways that we love and a lot of different kinds of relationships that we have in our lives. And so, very specifically, asking you to reflect on who were the trusted adults in your life that loved you into being, that taught you really important lessons about love. And I will, again, Jeremy, if you're reflecting, feel free to unmute and interact and share some of those reflections. I begin by offering a little bit of my journey and my story. So, like many of you probably on this webinar, I'm from the 1900s, as my children like to remind me, specifically from the year 1980. And I was born on Long Island to these incredible human beings, Darlene and Bob Orff. For those of you who are local to the Plymouth area, they are local celebrities. You might know them as Nene and Bob. Very engaged parents, very engaged grandparents now. And quite frankly, I didn't know how good I had it and how privileged I was as a child to have grown up in an environment filled with love and laughter. And so that is how I was raised by these amazing people. And when they weren't raising me, this human being was Mr. Rogers, who is one of my personal heroes. And perhaps if you are a child of the 1980s or 90s, you remember Mr. Rogers. I learned a lot about my feelings, about my worth, about feeling good, about who I was and what I brought into the world, and certainly about love, and some fun songs too from Mr. Rogers. So I give him shout out for being one of those trusted adults who I never had a chance to meet in person, but certainly who taught me a lot. And then fast forward to the late 90s, I grew up quite quickly, as you can tell, and I landed here in Plymouth in the fall of 1999. It was an adventure that almost didn't happen for me because I actually grew up about an hour from here in the Upper Valley in Lebanon. And so my parents bribed me to visit Plymouth State, then college, because I felt like it was entirely too close to home. And I thought I was going to venture out much farther. But they promised me if I visited campus that they would then, after the tour, take me to Canby Lake Park. And of course, I couldn't pass that up. And quite honestly, from the moment that I stepped foot on this campus, I fell in love with this place, with this community, and with the people here. So here I am. I never left. This community is my home. And during the day, I have the great honor of serving as Director of Student Life, overseeing our orientation, our new student programming, clubs and orgs, all of the fun campus-wide traditions. We actually have ski day tomorrow, so it's a very fun winter carnival week here for our students. I also oversee community impact programs, so all the service learning and volunteer partnerships we have with all of our local organizations, and of course, campus rec. So all the fun stuff on campus. And I'm sure, Jeremy, you have fun too over in enrollment, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else than engaging with students in this capacity. Oh, you're here.
Well, I just wanted to say, yes, I love working in admissions. It's tremendous. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah. And I think across the board on this campus, we enjoy the work that we're doing together. So a lot of collaborating happening. I also teach in the youth development program for undergraduate students, and I teach in the organizational leadership master's program. So that is a part of my journey. And of course, I've learned a great deal from my trusted faculty members, mentors that help raise me on this campus, and of course from my parents. But the lessons that I have learned that have been the most profound in terms of love have been from my four kids. And for the parents on this call, I know Jeremy is a parent. We learned so much from the young people in our lives. In fact, the day my oldest was born, I had yet a glimpse of how much my parents loved me. So, of course, I should mention my partner, Brian, though I said this wasn't about romance novels. We did actually meet in third grade, so that is a romantic story for another time. But hopefully he's squared away for Valentine's Day and for me. And I think no matter who the person is, we can all really share in a common experience of pain and joy and love and fear. And I have never, honestly, met a person who told me that their story was once upon a time I was born and everything was great and everything stayed great and everything is still great, the end. And that is because life is way more complex than that. And as multifaceted human beings, we are way more complex than that. And because we all experience the trauma and the challenges, and we love our way through it. So I invite us to think a little bit about the disconnection that we've experienced and what disconnection looks like in the lives of our children and youth. Not just what it feels like in our own bodies, but what does it look like? How do we recognize that our students are experiencing disconnection? Give a little snapshot here of the most recent New Hampshire Department for Health and Human Services Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This survey was most recently conducted 2023. It's a survey that is self-reported at the high school level, and it is administered every other year. And there are some good news here, actually. So I'm excited to highlight some of the good news. Approximately 40% of students reported that they had persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in 2023, and that is a decrease from 2021. The percentage of students reporting that their mental health was not good always or most of the time also decreased from 2021. And of the students reporting that they felt sad, empty, hopeless, angry, or anxious, a higher percentage reported getting the help they needed. So some good news, and also holding space for the fact that those are some high numbers still, and that we have a significant number of young people who are experiencing and disconnection and are engaging in risky behaviors and experiencing things like bullying and self-harm and suicidal ideation, and they need us. And so out of the gate, just want to extend gratitude for the important work you are doing to meet those needs on a daily basis. Also, a look at loneliness. So this is specific to college campuses. So a lot of what we do in terms of cultivating belonging here in student life at PSU really comes out of some of this research. And it is a new epidemic on college campuses. Loneliness is most prevalent among young people. So 27% of individuals ages 19 through 29 indicate feeling lonely. Of course, we know loneliness existed before the COVID-19 pandemic, but that time period only compounded this public health issue. And then, of course, just to put out there very clearly, there is a distinction between social isolation and loneliness. Of course, social isolation, which we collectively felt, the pandemic was a collective trauma. That is a lack of social interaction. We remember living on Zoom. Like, I feel very at home here in Zoom land. I quite honestly wish I could see you, but I am very comfortable lingering in Zoom, though I would, of course, rather be with you in person. But loneliness is different. Loneliness is a psychological state of feeling that need for love and belonging is not met. And when we have young people who are socially isolated, this takes a significant toll on their mental health. I believe it's our ethical and social obligation to provide opportunities for students to develop connections, for them to build community. And so this is a main purpose that, that we serve here at PSU for undergraduate population, and a purpose that you are fulfilling every single day as educators. And what does love have to do with any of that? Any of the disconnection, the pain, the suffering, the trauma? I'm just going to channel my inner Tina Turner. What does love have to do with it? I won't sing, I'll spare you that. But I would say everything. It has everything to do with addressing pain and suffering in the lives of our youth. And I'm not the only one who says that. So as a love researcher, I have heard all the skeptics. I actually invite that because it fuels me, quite honestly. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the study that I had the opportunity to be a part of, and the work that has inspired me. For now, it's important to really state that human beings have the need to be loved and to give love. And without that connection, that's when we experience pain and suffering. I provide the citation for not just the skeptics, but the skeptical part of all of us. We all have that skeptical part in us, right? And even though I very much believed in love-based practices from the beginning of my career as an educator, I also, maybe similarly to you, would sometimes shy away from that word. Now, I invite you to take a collective breath after going through all of um, those highlights about the struggles and the pain that young people are experiencing, also recognizing that we experience the complexity of that in our own lives. And yet we show up every single day for our students. So inviting just a mindful moment, a collective breath. I need it. I hope it's beneficial to you. And quite honestly, that is a love-based practice, bringing some mindfulness into our spaces together and reminding ourselves that here we are with each other, here to learn, here to grow, here to together. That is loving in and of itself. So now I do offer this little activity. I invite you to engage in the chat, Jeremy. If anybody does end up reflecting, this would be a fun time to learn a little bit about who's here. I'm asking, why did you choose to become an educator? Before the challenges, before the external political pressure, before the policies and the regulations and all the required curriculum, before all of that? What inspired you? What was placed on your heart? Why did you get into the profession in the first place?
And as we ponder those things, just a reminder to all that you can put that into the chat, and that's where we'd love for you to place some of those responses. Again, Q&A could also be used, but Q&A is more along the lines of a question. So thankfully, please do put those in the chat. One question that we had was, as an educator, our role is to educate students. And generally, we do find ourselves being friendly with those students. Um, is there anything tangible or anything that we can do that is appropriate to just further that feeling of friendship and that student's feeling of love that we have for them that can better their educational endeavors there?
Absolutely. So that's a good question. Actually, it's a question that I have pondered a great deal on because there are so many ways. Shout out to Mr. Rogers again. There are so many ways to show someone you care about them. And we certainly want to maintain healthy boundaries and make sure that all of our connections within a classroom, outside of a classroom, are appropriate, that those healthy boundaries are maintained. Because if they're not, of course, that is not love. In working with some of our undergraduate students in the Mentoring and Empowering Youth course that I teach, where they actually go out to local schools and local agencies, facilitating youth programs and working directly with youth, we talk about how do you cultivate a safe and nurturing environment without being, for lack of a better way of saying it, weird, right? Without saying, hey, I just want you to know that I love you. Well, it's, I would say, somewhat more comfortable working with younger students. My daughter, who is 4, goes to the Center for Young Children Families on campus, and very often when I drop her off or pick her up, she runs over to her teacher and gives a hug, and that is very much welcomed. And um, it is not necessarily the case when we're working with middle schoolers or high schoolers that that is always welcome. So the number one thing is making sure that however we're building that bridge, however we're extending that outreach or that connection, that it is truly welcomed. And it takes time, building relationships is in any area of our lives, and especially obviously in education, it takes time and it takes consistency. It's been my experience that young people will, whether consciously or unconsciously, test a relationship, especially if they've experienced traumatic relationships in the past or currently. They will test for trust. Are you going to be consistent? Are you going to show up? Even when I'm having big, heavy, struggling feelings, are you going to show up with patience and kindness? And that is one way to demonstrate love. And we have to do that over and over again. So, any other reflections on why did we choose this profession in the first place, Jeremy?
Yes, our folks who are participating are doing a wonderful job. If you look in the chat, you'll notice a lot of heartfelt reasons why they became educators. There are a lot of them in there, and they're honestly, I speak for myself, but they are all definitely the right reasons to become an educator, which is wonderful to see. Feel free to take a look at that. And one thing, Jess, we are having intermediate audio bits, so I wonder if you're touching your microphone from time to time. But it's fine, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. I apologize, but you did
Okay.
promise that if I'm cutting in and out, you were gonna cut in with a love song, perhaps. No?
Well, I mean, we need to get a
Okay.
little bit further on.
Okay, okay. A little further on. Okay.
That's right.
And I should have asked this prior, but where can I see the chat?
So right in the bottom middle there,
Oh,
there's,
wait, I found it.
yeah,
Thank you.
you click that.
Okay, awesome.
We'll give Jess a moment to read through some of those. I do want to thank those of you who are participating today for adding in your reasons that you have become an educator. And again, just a reminder, you can ask questions that are specific to the topic in the Q&A, and those are especially useful if you do not want to, if you want to ask your question anonymously.
Perfect. So this is great. And so fun to see in the chat that I know some of you I consider dear colleagues and friends. So thank you for joining us today, talking about where did we learn about love from our family, from our grandparents, our parents, and then in terms of why did we become educators in the first place. Some because their parents were educators, just wanting to help kids because of the kids. And I would bet, and I didn't read all of them, so I feel like this is a fair bet. I would bet most of us not because we were hoping to be challenged by all the external pressure, but really because we wanted to empower and inspire the next generation. So thank you for doing that. I want to share just a little bit from my journey of why I became an educator, even before I even knew that I was an educator. I taught sixth, seventh, and eighth grade at a private school. And then I was expecting my oldest, and the opportunity to join the PEMA Youth Center came up. And so I accepted the position as executive director. It was always my dream to run a nonprofit. And for those of you who are local, you're probably very familiar with the PEMA Youth Center. For those of you who are not, it is a local nonprofit here in Plymouth, and we serve as an after school and empowerment program for middle school and high school youth. And we do have the typical after school enrichment programs, art, education, and recreational opportunities, STEM activities, empowerment groups. We cook dinner every afternoon before our youth head home. And I like to think also that of the PEMA Youth Center as an extended family or a second home. And for many of our youth participants, that is definitely the case. When youth walk into the youth center, the first thing they see, which is painted on the front wall, is if no one has told you they love you today, know that we do, and we always will. And everything that the youth center is built on are love-based practices. So we don't engage in any punishment or public shaming. Everything is deliberative dialogue, conversation, education, mindfulness. We talk about how our decisions impact not only ourselves, but each other, our broader community. It really is a nurturing place. And over the years, we've had students reflect on their experience. We actually have a big whiteboard wall in the back of the PEMU Center, and one youth participant said PYC is a place where people can express themselves and not be judged. Another said PYC gives me a safe place to go, and I learn something new every day. Over the years, and I worked at the youth center for 12 years, I still serve as board president. In fact, after this webinar, I'll be headed down to a board meeting. And our current executive director was one of my youth participants when she was 11. So really a full circle moment, and I couldn't be more proud of her. But a lot of educators, guidance counselors, even principals, family members, caregivers would come into the youth center over the years and ask, what is going on here? But in a good way, I promise. Because they would talk about a specific young person who was struggling at home or at school, academically or socially, and yet talking about their positive experience at the youth center. And essentially, they were looking for, like, what are you doing here? And I still always, very clear. And I say, well, it's just all about love. And most people would breathe a sigh of relief because we just get it. Yeah, we all need that. We just get it. Some people would say, but what about STEM? And absolutely, that is very important. But we cannot get to higher order thinking. We can't get to the executive functioning unless we feel connected and safe in our bodies and with each other. And so it's so important. This is where I first learned the significance of love-based practices and where my heart really was inspired to go down what feels like such a rabbit hole in researching love and trying to legitimize these practices. So, what does love have to do with teaching and learning?
Hey,
Again,
Jess.
everything. Yes.
I'm sorry. That was almost a spot where I was able to jump right in.
Yeah,
We do have a question from
great.
someone who's teaching well over 300 children a week. And really, I think the question comes from a place of this person has a special relationship with about 10 of the students and would love to have, to fill that up a little bit more. The classes are anywhere between 50 minutes a week or two 30-minute classes a week. It's a really big space trying to keep the kids moving and learning new skills. Do you have any recommendations there on how to really almost be the most efficient and the best at being able to create those relationships with students? How do we do better there? Any suggestions?
How do we do it in a large group setting? Yeah, it's something I think about even working with young adults on this campus, right? Tomorrow we're going to have 1,500, well, maybe. Right now we have 1,200 students registered to go to ski day and be on the mountain. So, how do we connect with a large group? I'm hoping that you don't have 1,200 students. Um, and a lot of that comes down to what does the environment feel like? Is it welcoming? Is everyone valued? Does everyone get a chance to be heard? A lot of times, and I think we can all relate to this, we show up at a large meeting and it's like we fidget, we talk to our neighbor, we're kind of trying to get settled. And I had a mentor who years ago told me that no one has truly arrived until their voice is in the space. And so, one thing that I think we can do that is most loving, especially in a large group, is help to ground everybody by just letting them introduce themselves, not assuming, what their what name they'd like to be called by, or um, reading down a roster. One thing that it works for, I think, the students in my class in terms of how do we maintain a nurturing classroom environment that is the most connected and loving possible is making sure everyone feels like they can show up. And so instead of just doing the roster call, I like everyone to introduce themselves and do a little icebreaker. Maybe it feels a little cheesy, but young adults like it too. Yesterday at Student Senate, the question was introduce yourself and then what brought you to Plymouth? Well, that was a really great way also to collect some important data about what are we doing well and how do we do more of that to create more opportunity for connection and community. So I think making sure everyone has an opportunity to show up. Sometimes we see um, behaviors that are not necessarily pro-social behaviors when people feel like they need the attention. And simply giving everybody the attention and simply using, things like circles, making sure everyone can be seen, everyone feels like they have a place, no one's sitting in the back. Things like that for large groups are really good in terms of cultivating the connection and having those love-based practices emerge.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. So what does love have to do with teaching and learning? Everything. It has everything to do with it. From, like I was just saying, how do we set up our environments? What does it feel like to come into this environment? Is my voice valued? All of that. The need to feel loved in the context of honoring shared humanity is a deep and abiding condition of the human experience. We literally need it. Like I talk about with students, we all know we need oxygen. We need to breathe. We need to take a deep breath once in a while. We need water, right? We all have our water bottles. We know we need sleep and food, sleep even before food. Um, and we need shelter. We need that security and protection, but we also need social connection. We cannot live without it. So it is a basic need, and we cannot learn effectively without it. So, why do we teach connection? Why do we care about love and belonging? Because human beings need each other, because it's required for us to learn. We're not able to learn new things unless we feel secure and connected. It's that simple. Um, Love fosters connection and a sense of belonging, and belonging supports our students' success across the board academically, their engagement, their mental health. This is a EAB slide. I'll quickly point out because I use it a lot on campus. and the importance of student belonging and how do we foster student belonging. 5 main components, making sure that it's integrated into the student experience through our policies, through our processes, our practices, making sure that we are prioritizing mental health and well-being, that we are actively engaged in learning pedagogies that support the connection in classrooms, that there's plenty of opportunity for social engagement, not just in the classroom, but in the co-curricular landscape. And obviously, educator mentorship and support is integral. So learning is very much dependent on love and connection. I've said that a lot. And this is a great book by Matthew Lieberman that really goes through the neuroscience behind how do we learn and why our social interactions are so foundational to that. More good news about human connection. It has significant health benefits. So studies have found that relationships reduce stress and heart-related risks and are connected to living a longer life. I will say also, I found an article a few years back about how grandparents who are connected to their grandkids live longer. So I actually printed out the article and I folded it up and I put it in a card to my parents just that said, "You're welcome, love me," because they are very engaged with their grandkids. We need that connection. And even just holding hands releases our feel-good hormones in our brain, right? Reducing our cortisol levels, increasing our serotonin. So this is all really important. It's not just fluffy stuff, right? It's not just the extra stuff that we would love to bring into the classroom if we have time. It's actually foundational and integral to our overall health and well-being and ability to learn. One really powerful quote by Barbara Fredrickson from the book Love 2.0: just as our body was designed to extract oxygen from the Earth's atmosphere and nutrients from the foods you ingest, your body was designed to love. Love, like taking a deep breath or eating an orange when you're depleted and thirsty, not only feels great, but it's also life-giving and indispensable source of energy, sustenance, and health. So anytime I feel that skeptical, critical voice emerge in myself, thinking like, really, like, are we making time for these love-based practices? Yes, absolutely. We have to make time for it. It is that important.
Hey,
So
Jess,
yes,
they're asking, could you repeat the name of the book? And I should
sure.
add to everyone that we will share the slides that come with links and everything, but they would love to hear the name of the book again.
Yes, the book is called Love 2.0, Creating Happiness and Health in Moments of Connection, and it's by Barbara Fredrickson,
Thank you
who's
very much.
another personal hero. So now I invite you again to enter into the chat. What does love look like in your classroom? And we started getting here, right? I kind of gave a little bit of some spoilers, but what does it look like in your classroom? And my guess is that you don't go from student to student, gaze into their eyes uncomfortably and say, "You are loved and you are valued." That's typically not how we foster love in our classrooms. And that's not to say that we don't tell our students that we love them. In fact, I offer, even in love's terms, statements of positive affirmation. I love how you helped your friend. I love how you show up and I love how you keep trying. I think of Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Fixed Mindset, and how do we provide those affirmations to students in a way that helps them grow in competency and grow in through practice. And a lot of those strategies I kind of frame as, I love that you are helping your friend. I love that you are trying so hard. So I'm just gonna find my way back to the chat really quickly and see, displaying photos of children, positive affirmations, welcoming words. Absolutely. Thank you. Listening to stories, listening is so important. It's like you know exactly what the next slide is going to say. Giving students complete attention. I love that. We all need that. And inviting place, sharing freely, greeting them at the door, positive postcards. I learned what reels were this past summer. Jeremy, you know what reels are, correct?
I'm not cool. You know,
Okay.
I
Well,
fish with them.
the only social media I have is the Facebook, and I know that that's where the people from the 1900s are. But this past summer, my kids taught me about reels, and they're like, very short videos. And there was this really popular reel of not just one teacher, like teachers that have secret handshakes with their kids, and that's how they greet their students into their classroom. That is one really powerful way to connect with every student and show positive regard in that way. So, yeah,
We
thank
would
you so much.
We do have an interesting question that is kind of a statement and then kind of a
Okay.
question. It might require a follow-up from the questioner, but I'll
Okay.
give it a go. We do have
Cool.
a participant joining us from India today, so that's quite something. But the statement is this: regular communication with students develops a profound degree of understanding, and it generates trust, and trust gives an upthrust to knowledge. But it becomes difficult sometimes when it comes to make a potential parity with academic progression. How can we go about it in an individually different classes? I think so when the classes are different.
Mhm.
That's the question. I don't know. We might need a follow-up, but go to town.
How can we do it in an individual fashion?
How
Um,
can we go about it in an individually different classes? So I suspect that the classes are different, again, different groups of people, perhaps. And
and
again, you might request a follow-up.
okay, I might need a follow-up to clarify, but what speaks to me right now is just recognizing the uniqueness in every individual. And every student is a unique human being who is multifaceted. And so, one thing I try to remind myself, one way to connect with a particular student isn't always the same way I connect with another student because they need something different. And for the parents in this webinar, I think you can certainly relate. I thought I had parenting down with my first kid. And then my second kid came, and lo and behold, he was so different from the first one. And I thought, wait a second, all of my soothing techniques and everything that I thought I learned, I could just throw out the window. And so I think a lot of it is, as educators, reminding ourselves that we need to, one, show up as authentically ourselves, which is something I'm going to get to, and to allow space for our students to show up as authentically themselves. And this takes a lot of time, especially as we go back to the conversation we had about a large group. Well, it pertains to different classes, different dynamics in different classes, and making sure that everyone's needs are getting met in the very unique ways they need those needs to be met. And just like we have all kinds of different learners, we have all kinds of different ways to relate and connect. And I mean, you've heard about the different love languages. I really have grown in showing love and care through gift giving, and I find it really fun. And I recognize, I made the joke at the top of the webinar. I hope my partner is gathering his Valentine's Day gifts for me. I demonstrate love with gift giving. He's working on it. And so I receive love differently. Our students, our young people are the same. They're just younger people, right? So we all receive individually in different ways. And so meeting students where they are becomes really important with how are we going to connect with them. So I hope that gets at it a little bit. But yes, going back to what does love look like in your classrooms? I mean, you all said it. Making sure everyone is included, creating safe and brave spaces, right? I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. She talks about not only feeling safe, but also having the courage to show up genuinely as ourselves, active listening, offering positive affirmations, building community, celebrating everyone's contributions, as well as the unity that we share in community, demonstrating care, facilitating dialogue, and leaning into hard conversations. all of that, certainly mindfulness-based activities, all of it. And so, just to give you a little highlight, I know we're starting to get to the end of our time. In terms of the work that I did in researching love, actually, it happened in 2020 when we were experiencing the pandemic. I had planned, I won't go too much into methodology, but I'm happy to answer questions. I had planned a qualitative study interviewing educators from across the country who integrated mindfulness based practices into their classrooms to foster love and connection. And I anticipated using Zoom for the majority of those interviews because many of the educators that opted into the study were nowhere near New Hampshire geographically. But there were a few from the region, and I had hoped to do some of that work in person. Well, COVID had other plans for all of us. And I found myself behind a screen talking about human to human connection with educators who were socially disconnected from their students. So a really interesting element emerged that wouldn't have otherwise been there in terms of the perspective that we now had, the very new perspective of what does it mean to be this socially distant and disconnected. And that came out in findings in terms of just how important these practices were for the classroom environment for the students, and not surprisingly, but most significantly for the educators. So we'll start with that. So in terms of impact on educators, they talked a lot about that this was connected to their professional identity. Bringing love-based practices into the classroom was about who they were as an educator. And so it didn't only inform pedagogy and the way that they taught, but it also had a lot to do with who they were and who they became professionally. Some of them talked about life transformation, that, the reason I got into education in the first place was so that I could empower and inspire. And this gives me the opportunity to do that. So there was definitely indications of increased connection inward to self and also outward to students and facilitating positive connections with students. In terms of the perceived impacts on students, because again, this study was about the perception of educators, the findings fell into two categories. So one, social emotional behavioral development, and two, cognitive development. So first, educators talked about an increase in positive self-image and identity for students, an increase in their self-esteem, just feeling more secure. They also talked about self-regulated learning, self-regulated emotions and behaviors. Students were able to navigate those emotions more effectively. And they talked about relationship building. So students were developing positive pro-social relationships with each other. In terms of cognitive development, there was an established common language or a shared language and vocabulary that they would use, kind, respectful language. There was an increase in students' ability to focus and concentrate during lesson time, and in terms of preparedness, and not just being prepared to learn, but being truly eager to learn. And then in terms of impacts on the classroom environment, which to me is so important because it impacts all of us, it really all boiled down to a caring and connected environment. And the way that that care and connection manifested itself was through a presence and a calm and a peace in the actual environment itself, through again that shared language, through pro-social behavior. In fact, the educators talked about needing less disciplinary action, not needing those color-coded cards as much. Or I remember when I was in school, my name would be put up on the blackboard. It was actually a green board at the time. And then if I talked again, it was a check mark. And if I got a second check, I was in for recess. There was less need for those disciplinary practices. Also, this idea of just a positive impact on the culture in the classroom, that there was more care for and understanding, more patience for each other, an increase in value of their differences, and also a greater sense of community connection.
I suspect you already know, but we're in the fourth quarter.
Perfect. I think I'm making good time. I'm
Yes,
catching up on my time.
it's all good.
Cool. So what this all came down to for me really was this concept of interbeing, which was really coined by Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, because there was this element of increased connection with self that love-based practices cultivates, and also an increased connection with others, which is really our interconnection or our respect and honor of needing each other, which is really important for us as individuals and us as a society. So big takeaways. Here's the home stretch. Ready? Big takeaways. If there's anything that I hope you gain from today's talk, it is just gratitude for the really important work you're doing, that you're already doing, and hopefully some inspiration to keep doing it. Human beings need love. And regardless of how you're showing your students that they are cared about, that they are safe, that you are there for them, the consistency, thank you for doing it because it's really important. Love is our truest nature. It is who we are when the fear falls away and when we can be our best. That's who we are. Receiving love is something we need in order to learn, quite simply. And it's also something we can learn. So we can teach that. We do teach that. Mr. Rogers taught that. Love is the human experience. It is so integral to who we are as human beings. It is our experience. So, though sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable to talk about, maybe because of the broad definitions of love, the different kinds of love, the different relationships that we have, the fact that it's very romanticized in our culture, in our society, to the point where we have Valentine's Day in the context of romantic love, it is so integral to who we are. And we bring who we are into the classroom. If there's anything that I took away from the interviews from the incredible educators that I had the opportunity to engage in conversation with, it is that we can't just say these things. We can't just know these things in theory. We have to be these things. We have to embody love authentically in the classroom. So going back to some of the questions, because I didn't want to spoil everything. This is like my big finish. Going back to some of the questions, like how do we do this? We are it. We have the courage to come into these educational landscapes and environments and be it, to embody it. It's having the courage, like Brene Brown would say, and showing up authentically us. And speaking of Brene Brown, one thing I was going to mention as well, there is a big difference between fitting in and belonging, right? Fitting in, think the middle school cafeteria. Do I have the right shoes on? Who do I sit with? Am I going to be accepted? Sometimes that means we have to contort who we are just to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, is being valued and loved for who we are, who we genuinely are. And that is the kind of environment that we are hopefully building for our students. One of my greatest heroes, Maya Angelou, love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. And if there's one thing I think our young people need right now, it is hope and a whole lot of love. So I want to thank you for the work that you do, and I offer you this loving kindness. Also happy to engage in questions and take more of your reflections. But to close out, may you be well, may you be peaceful, may you be happy, and may you know you are loved for all the important work that you are doing. I do have a bunch of references, and like Jeremy said, we will be sending out these slides. So you can take a deeper dive if you're interested. I have a couple recommendations, some newer articles, things for you to read. A great article coming out of Harvard Business School Love is a classroom strategy, and also another article, Love-Based Practices in Education. Two good reads. You'll have the links in the slides. Recommendations for you. This is a shameless plug. Of course, I mentioned I teach in the org leadership master's program. We do have transpersonal psychology being offered the second half of the semester. It's an amazing course. The Circle of Life Leading with Well-Being is offered over the summer. I will be teaching Exploring Personal and Organizational Health in the fall. A lot of the wisdom that you already know, but also shared today in terms of the importance of connecting and how do we embody that as leaders comes out in these courses. And then because my friend Jeremy convinced me that I should tell you about the podcast that I co-host with faculty member Jackie Nelson, we have Loved Ones in the Loop, which you can find on Spotify and Apple. To be quite honest, it really is geared for parents and family members of young adults in terms of how do we help them navigate their own personal journeys. And so if you are a parent, you might find this helpful. If you're a parent of a young adult or an emerging young adult, you might find that fun. And then just again, thank you for being here today and thank you for the important work you are doing.
Thank you so much. Many offers of thanks in the chat. Everyone seems to have very much appreciated your talk this afternoon. I don't see, oh, wait, maybe I do see one additional question. There is an additional question, if you can still hear me. Can it be difficult for students to receive love from teachers at school when they are not getting it at home in a recognizable way? Did you hear that?
I mean, I did hear you, but remember that love-based practice of active listening. I didn't get it because I was reading that one of our colleagues, dear friend who works over at the high school, they are celebrating Love Week at Plymouth Regional High School. So how timely and how great. So could you please read the question again, Jeremy? I would appreciate that greatly.
Not a problem at all. Um, it can be difficult for students to receive love from teachers at school when they are not getting it at home in a recognizable way. Can it be difficult for them to receive the love you're offering if you're not
Yes.
getting it at home? And then maybe how do we get there? But
I just want to affirm that. Yes, I think, and also just holding space for the fact that educators are more than teachers in the classroom, that we are providing and meeting a whole host of needs and resources and support. One really quick story that I offer in terms of how do we get there. I think you're probably there, you just don't know you are. I think it really is about planting seeds of hope and love in the hearts and minds of young people. And sometimes we don't know when those seeds are going to germinate and sprout. I offer this really quick story about a young man who gives me permission to actually share this story publicly. Roger, who I had at the youth center years and years ago, he he was a young person who I didn't at the time feel like I was connecting with. He didn't really have any positive things to say about the program or me specifically or anything really. And for the sake of a story, it'd be so great if there was this aha moment and we made this connection. We just didn't. He came every day, and I never really felt like we connected, and I never really felt like he was really enjoying his time. And then he graduated and he left town. And I, for many years, honestly, felt like he was the one young person that I just didn't connect with, and that in some ways I felt like I failed him. Until fast forward years later, I was over shopping at the grocery store. My three oldest kids were young, and the youngest was in diapers at the time, and I had a full cart, and I'm coming around, and who is at the checkout counter but this young man? And I like had that visceral reaction, like, ugh, I never connected with him. Um, and then before I knew it, because we locked eyes and I was committed, I couldn't go anywhere, right? Because that would have been rude and disrespectful. So before I knew it, he was coming over the counter and hugging me and saying, Jess, it is so good to see you. It's good to be home. And I want to tell you that the youth center was probably the highlight of my childhood. And is what got me through high school. And you were awesome. And the staff was great. and the food was great. And these are all things that it didn't really feel like at the time. He really appreciated it all. And so this was like a very important lesson in my life because if I didn't have that chance interaction during a time that he was back in the region before leaving the region again, if I didn't have that chance interaction to this day, I would have thought I'd never connected with that young person. And I didn't help with the challenges he was experiencing. And in fact, now that I had that interaction ever since, I kind of carry in my heart that I might never know, you might never know the incredible impact that you have in the lives of the youth and the fact that you show up every day to even extend the care and concern, it makes an impact, even if they're struggling with trauma, wherever it is, at home, otherwise. Just the fact that it only takes, and research tells us, it only takes one trusted adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. In terms of ACEs, adverse childhood trauma, we know that one trusted adult can help change the whole course and the whole journey of someone's life. So thank you. My deepest gratitude for everything that you're doing. Good luck at Love Week, Plymouth Regional, and hoping you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day celebrating love in all its forms and all its ways. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. And they do want one more plug to
Oh,
your podcast.
one more plug to the
They do.
podcast.
It's been requested. What was the name of the
Wow.
podcast
It
again?
is called Loved Ones in the Loop. And
Okay.
again, geared towards parents, families, dear ones, helping support their young people through the transition to college and into adulthood. So tune in if you're interested. It's a fun time. We do a lot of storytelling, bringing in resources. I think it's fun. I hope you enjoy it.
And thank you so very much. We are glad that you were here. We just would remind you all that we do have one more educator webinar coming up this term. So watch your emails and you'll receive that email suggestion to attend that talk as well. Again, thank you so much.
Thanks all. Be well.